used to have tools spread all over my house, and I got really tired of that. So I decided to build this. This is a mobile tool rack that has all of my tools all in one place. Everything is here. And it may look like a fairly complicated project, but it was actually really straightforward. There's not much to this. It's just a matter of size. It's not complexity. This is basically just several sheets of plywood cut in pieces. So it's 4 feet tall, 2 feet wide, and 1 foot deep. So just cutting them in that, in those dimensions, and you have a 1 foot by 4 foot section on the left, another on the right, 1 foot by 2 foot shelves, total of 4 of them, and then some. Those are 2 feet by I think like 8 inches or so, 6 inches, maybe even less than that. On the back as for those panels, and then the only other thing are these pieces of wood. Some of them square, some of them rectangular, that serve to hold the shelves up. This is actually a late addition, as I realized that if I just screwed all that together, it would fall apart immediately. I'll get to that in a little bit, some of the mistakes I made. But these keep the shelves stable, basically. So a quick tour of the tool rack. On the bottom are all of my power tools. The next shelf up is actually kind of miscellaneous objects, tape and string and other things like that. Because the next shelf up from that are all of my hand tools, because I want those to be immediately accessible. I want to be able to go over and say, okay, I'm going to grab a tool, right, and it's just ready to go. And then the top are all fasteners. So I have screws, bolts, stuff along those lines, nails, etc., glues, and my hot glue gun all up here. And the idea is that in any given project, I will probably pull out several power tools and use them over the course of the entire project. In other words, I don't need to be coming back and forth to this a lot for power tools, so they can be a little bit harder to get to. Hand tools, on the other hand, I'm often going over and grabbing a screwdriver or wire strippers or whatever, so I want those to be easily accessible. And the drill bits, by the way, are also back in here. So I have shelves of drill bits, pretty straightforward there. And then, a whole bunch of drill bits there. This is just a pack I bought online. I have some ideas there, but we'll get to that later. And then any fasteners, screws, glue, etc. I often want to go to immediately and pull a few for a project, or just pull them right off and sort of round it with them. Screws especially, I'll get partway through a project and realize, I need, a couple of smaller screws for this. Let me just go and grab a couple from my sort of miscellaneous collection of random screws. And that would be a good band name. And so the advantage is if they're right there on top, I can just kind of go over, look down, and pull things out more quickly and more easily. So some of the things I did on here that I'm kind of happy with, and then we'll get to some of the things that I wish I had done differently, or that I kind of changed as I went along. One is that I drilled holes in this shelf for all of these hand tools. So I can just pull something out and put it right back in, and they kind of sit there. So very easy to access, while also keeping them out of the way. That worked pretty well. I also like the weight distribution. The power tools are heavy. They're on the bottom, so they're not going to be stressing the upper shelves. That makes a lot of sense. A few other things on here. Over on the side, I put a few things like scrapers and a file and speed square, things along those lines that I want to have access to and take up a fair amount of space if they were just sitting on a shelf. And I can't really, I could, I could store this way, but then I'd be, killing myself as I work with this. That's no good. So I have this on the side. And then this is crazy. So you may be wondering what this is. This is actually a giant saw. You may be wondering, what is this doing here? This is actually a gardening tool. This is used for sawing off limbs on trees and on people if you wanted to. That made me that gave me goosebumps right there. I keep this because it is a useful gardening tool, but also sometimes I need to make a quick cut. And sometimes it's easier to just pull this out and make a quick cut. I can be a little more precise with a hand tool than I can with, say, a jigsaw or a circular saw, big power tools. So it's nice having something where I have like that fine hand control. So I just keep this on here. And again, one of the nice things about a rack like this is that it allows you to just hang something off it like that. And then on the back, if things won't fall down, I have all of my socket wrenches back here. And these are just hanging off of large hooks. Now, I have used socket wrenches maybe twice in my life. I don't really do a lot of work on my my truck. I know how to do some basic things, but I'm not constantly disassembling my truck. So I wanted access to the socket wrenches. These are still occasionally useful, but I didn't need to have them all like hanging in a pretty row for easy access. I just wanted it so that I could kind of get to them easily. Or get to them fairly quickly, I should say. So not immediate access, but fairly quick access. And I also wanted them out of the way. Again, I didn't want this sitting up to take up shelf space. So having a couple hooks back here and just putting them on there made a lot of sense. So that worked rather nicely. I've also got handles on both sides, which helps me just kind of grab something and pull it around. So that's what went well. Some of the things I change, you can actually see here. So I put these backings, and I really wasn't thinking, because I put this one on here and was like, yep, that makes sense. Then I put each other backing piece level with the shelf. So as I move things around, things up here can just fall right off. Right? That's not very smart. I should have kept them up somewhat. Really, aligned this way, so the bottom is aligned with the shelf. That just would be a lot easier, and then have those down there, and it would be, pretty much exactly the same. Although maybe not all the way up. See, here's the thing. You may be wondering, why didn't I just put a back on the entire thing? Well, there's a reason for that. I actually really like being able to reach in from either side, to be able to work on a project, and be over here doing things, whatever, and then I may be working on something over here, right? Or I may be working on something, here, where I've got this around here, but I can move around here to grab things. So I actually like having access from both sides. But it really would have been nice to have more of a lip here. The way I could resolve this, and I may still, is I actually made a couple of extra of these. So I may just take one of these, cut it lengthwise, and then screw a board in here and a board in here. So I have just a couple of inches of lip there for those. Also, I didn't really do a great job with my cuts. This was all done with a circular saw, no table saw, no other sort of hand or a workshop power tools. So it was just me and a circular saw trying to get these. So some of these are kind of wavy, they don't quite go all the way on some of these lengths, but oh well. Other things I wish I had changed. Let me think. The bits. So these bits in these containers, that's actually fairly nice. But I think what I want to do, I saw a brilliant thing online. You take a piece of wood like a 2x4. You drill holes in it for each of your drill bits. And so each column is a different size of drill bit. And then you just take a Sharpie and write in, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever for each one. And then you insert all of your drill bits in there. So you have one column where all of these drill bits are here. And then right next to them is this drill bit, right? And they're all stacked vertically. That way, if I want to grab a drill bit, I just take the whole thing, look down and say, oh, I need a 1/4 inch drill bit. Pull one out, use it. And they're all kind of there, and they take up less horizontal space, right? So they're basically all standing up like this on that piece of wood. So I think I'm going to do that at some point. Low priority, but I like that idea a lot. And it makes more use of this kind of large vertical space. A few other things I'm gonna do. So I have my boxes of screws on these little platforms. These are just little rimmed plastic platforms, and the idea is I'm going to take like painter's tape or putty or things like that, or and not like not permanent putty, but like sticky stuff, tacky stuff, and use that to adhere these platforms to the top of the shelf. So these can go on there, and they won't just slide around as I'm moving around the rack. But then if I need to move the entire thing, I can just pull it off. And these I'm actually 3D printing. So I have the 3D printer over there. And getting the dimensions exactly right have been a bit of trial and error, as some boxes are slightly bigger than others, which is really annoying. But that's how I'm gonna resolve that. And I'm still evolving that. Same thing with these boxes of, this is my box of random screws, and that's just a 3D printed little box. And you could go to, Container Store, pretty much any, big box kind of a store, and find little containers like that. And so I'm going to do the same thing with my glues. So all the glues would be in a big little box like that. So again, just an evolution. I'm trying to think of anything else major that I would change. Oh, one other thing you may have noticed. Let me turn this back around, hopefully without anything falling off. Still getting used to kind of how easy this is. And again, these aren't all like in their final containers. So I've got some sandpaper down here, and just sitting in here next to the circular saw. And that's not really kind of an ideal place. So when I made it, I just realized I didn't really have a spot for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little pocket here on the side. So just little strips of wood down the side and down the bottom, and then another little piece of very thin plywood in front of that, probably down lower, and then those sheets can just slide into that pocket, and that's where they will live. So didn't really think about where sandpaper would go, but that makes a lot of sense. And the nice thing is those sheets of sandpaper are, I think, about 10 inches wide, as opposed to the 12 inches of a foot. So that should fit quite nicely into a pocket there. This is a good example of where this is not done, and it probably will not be done ever. I will keep on evolving this rack. I will change like this literal physical thing here, and I also will probably end up rebuilding it at some point. Not because it's wrong. Oh, that's another thing I want to change, or another mistake I made. I'll probably fiddle and realize, I don't like the height of this shelf, maybe, or the height of this shelf, or maybe something's too big or too small. Or as I add power tools, eventually I'll run out of space. So that's a problem there. Mistake I did make. I wanted this to be solid and sturdy. And so, for one, when I built this, that's another mistake I made. Initially, I didn't have any of these chunks of wood here for the shelves. I figured, well, I'll just screw together, the sides and the shelves, and then use these backers for support and to screw everything together. The problem with that is that plywood is very weak on its edges. If you're screwing just straight into the edge of plywood, it's not going to hold very well. It'll just sort of chew up that wood in the center. So this would have very little in the way of structural integrity if it was just pieces of plywood screwed to the ends of each other. So I needed these chunks of wood, and I added those as I was assembling it, as I realized, oh, that's an important thing. Now the other mistake I made is that I glued all this together. So all these pieces are glued together, and I did that because I wanted strength. I wanted this to not fall apart. The problem is now I can't reconfigure it. I can't say, oh, this shelf is a little high, let me lower it by a couple of inches. This is how it has to be. I'd have to rebuild it from scratch. So if I were doing this again, I probably would not glue it initially. I would just screw it all together and then play around with it and use it for a while. And then once I'm happy with it, either disassemble it, glue it, and screw it back together, knowing that would somewhat lessen the strength of the screw joints, but the glue should more than make up for that. Or just rebuild it from scratch, realizing, okay, now I know all the different things I do differently that time. I can do that again. How long did it take me to put this together, you may be asking? Not long. This was, and I didn't really measure it, but this was probably less than 8 hours of work total. Really, the time it took involved cutting the pieces, the plywood pieces, and then gluing and screwing them together in this configuration, and then drilling all the holes here for these tools. That's really what took pretty much all the time. So, I mean, you could probably get this done in 4 or 5 hours without, really rushing, although that would, you'd be working. So yeah, this is not hard to do. This is an easy weekend project to throw all this stuff together. It took me a couple of days because I was waiting for the glue to dry, and I'm also one of these people that needs to see something, think about it, and then come back and, a couple hours later I'll realize, oh, that's how I should do that, and I'll make that change. So I've been evolving this as I've assembled it and as I've been putting things in there. So this is my tool rack. Like I said, I'm actually really pleased with it. I think I said that. This is holding together really well and very functional. One of the things I love is that I can take anything here, anything I want, I can just access immediately. I can just go and grab stuff and just pull something out, and play around with it. It's very functional. It's all on casters, so I have 4 casters that are lockable. So I can lock that down, which I'm very happy about, being able to do that. Although I don't expect to lock it down anytime soon. It's just a really, really helpful way of doing things. I'm glad that I built it, and I think it's going to be an important part of how I build things moving forward. It did take some time, but I'm already seeing the time savings as I'm able to just immediately go and grab something. And even more importantly, as I'm thinking of new projects, I already am more excited to do them because I know I can assemble them very quickly. Suddenly now, instead of thinking, I gotta do this project, okay, what are the steps, how long it's gonna take, and being worried about how long it's gonna take, now I know, I can just go and grab the tools, right? And just have them there. And further, they're gonna be here. I'm not gonna be going into, a closet for this and into a drawer for that and kind of find stuff. It's all here. Just pull it out and use it. So if this sounds exciting, I hope you build something like this yourself. Like I said, the dimensions for me are 4 foot tall, 2 foot wide, 1 foot deep. And each of these shelves is slightly shorter than that. So because I wanted, there's a reason, so the back pieces are all 2 feet, which means, so they will span the entire thing, which means these shelves are basically 1 inch shorter because we have half an inch on either side. So the shelves are a little bit shorter. You have the full 2 feet on the back, and then the 23 and a half inches for these shelves across there. And this is this was just spare wood for these. So just find pieces of wood you can use for that. And it all comes together like that, just kind of boom. So I think this is again, it's a fairly uncomplicated build. It just takes some time, and it's a little unwieldy to put everything together, but something that you can actually do in a weekend and have everything ready for you. So that is my mobile tool rack. Hope you found this useful and interesting, and I hope that you are inspired by this to make something.